Huge update about Saudi Arabia and the war with Iran. I put out a video yesterday where I focused in on Saudi Arabia and how they've been playing this. If you haven't seen that video yet, go and watch that video. I'm not saying stop this one and watch it first, but you should make sure to see what I said there about Saudi Arabia and what we're looking for downrange in terms of their behavior and what that bodes for the future of the outcomes of this war. And so massive update. Let's get right to it. A lot to talk about on the Saudi Arabia-Iran front. So here we go. Let's just hit it. So here is a breaking story. Iran hit Saudi Arabia today. And this strike was at the Ras Tanura refinery. Okay, the Ras Tanura complex houses one of the Middle East's largest refineries with a capacity of 550,000 barrels per day and serves as a critical export terminal for Saudi crude oil. Saudi Arabia's state oil giant Aramco shut its Ras Tanura refinery following a drone strike. Okay. And that's obviously huge. Iran is striking Saudi assets here. And it says that they shut it down. The attack on Saudi Arabia's Ras Tanura refinery marks a significant escalation, with Gulf energy infrastructure now squarely in Iran's sights, said Torbjorn Stoltvedt, principal Middle East analyst at risk intelligence firm Versick Maplecroft. Okay, and so we saw that, and that looks, what that signals is that Saudi Arabia looks like it will be joining the war. And in response to this, we have the Saudis. There was a limited fire at Ras Tanura refinery brought under control following debris from intercepted drones. And what that means is that the Saudis then responded by summoning the Iranian ambassador. Saudi Arabia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs summoned Iran's ambassador to the kingdom, Ambassador to the kingdom Ali Reza Enayadi, on Sunday, following what it described as Iranian attacks targeting Saudi Arabia and several neighboring countries. During the meeting, Deputy Foreign Minister Walid El-Khareji conveyed the kingdom's strong dissatisfaction and condemnation of the attacks, the Saudi press agency reported. He stressed Saudi Arabia's firm rejection of any violations of state sovereignty, warning that such actions undermine regional security and stability. He also said the kingdom would take all necessary measures to defend its security and protect its territory. The summons comes amid rising regional tensions following reported Iranian actions targeting Saudi Arabia and Gulf states. The Iranians have been attacking Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states, and Saudi Arabia is now just basically saying that they're going to be entering the war. And in that previous video, I talked about the fact that before this war, Saudi Arabia was publicly signaling that they were opposed to U.S. attacks on the Iranian regime. They had pivoted against Israel over the previous 6 months to a year, away from normalization with Israel ever since October 7th. And now it looks like they're about to join a war against the Iranians. The Iranians kind of messed up here. But let's take a look at a couple clips from an interview with Brett Baer on the Fox on Fox News from yesterday, and he had some interesting insights about Iran. So, I'm sorry, about Saudi Arabia. Brett Baer. So there's two clips here that are part of the same interview. Here's the first one.
Editor Brett Baer. So great to see you this morning, Brett. You know, Jennifer just reported on that story in the Washington Post about whether or not the Saudi Arabia was influential in sort of pushing this this strike to begin with. But however true or untrue that story is, it's safe to say that that Iran has spectacularly miscalculated the reaction of their allies or not their allies, but their neighbors in the Middle East and how they would respond to all of this.
Oh, 100%. Good morning. I think that the Gulf Arab allies are allies, and you're talking about UAE, Saudi Arabia, you're talking about Qatar, Oman, even you can get to Kuwait. They have all been hit pretty hard with multiple strikes from Iran since this started. They were privately behind the effort, publicly putting out distancing statements, as they often do. But since the attacks, it has stiffened the spine of Gulf Arab allies. In fact, the UAE just put out that their air defenses dealt with 165 ballistic missiles, 2 cruise missiles, and 541 drones since the start of this operation. They've put most of those down, but some of them, as we've seen, have hit civilian areas, including a hotel. Well, that has given the GCC, the Gulf states, really this backbone to stand firm and say an attack of one of us is an attack on all of us, and they're standing with the U.S. and Israel.
You know, I love how.
So that was the first clip where they asked Brett about Saudi Arabia. So you see what he said there. He's just pointing out just the miscalculation that the Iranians made by attacking the Gulf states, by attacking Saudi Arabia. And that was before this attack on the refinery that I'm talking about. That just happened today. So things are really ramping up there. And, you know, when he's talking about like how they're turning these people, the Iranians are turning these Muslim states against them. And then they went on to talk about some domestic issues or domestic repercussions of the war. And then a little later in the interview, they came back to the topic of Iran.
Because I think you and Charlie were talking about a really significant regional development in all of this, because you were talking about the Gulf states and whether or not Iran really grossly miscalculated by striking our Gulf state allies. 66 missiles hit Qatar, 45 on Bahrain. And earlier in the show, our own General Jack Keane, really says not only are they responding, that they may actually get into the fight. Listen here to what General Keane said. I want to get your reaction.
They have expanded into the Gulf states, and you can see that taking place. The Gulf states are adequately defending themselves. Three of them are preparing for combat offensive operations. One has already started, and 2 others are about to get going. This backfired on the Iranians. They thought that this would create an international uproar. The war is being expanded. It's now a regional war, and as such, pressure being put on the United States and Israelis to bring this to a halt. The Gulf states are responding. They're adequately defending themselves, but they are frustrated with the Iranians. They publicly were supporting the Iranians and resisting the strike. Hopefully, they've learned a big lesson here from the Iranians.
I don't think, Brett, anyone foresaw Gulf states, as you heard from General Keane there, if that is indeed true, that at least one Gulf state has already got into the fight, 3 others with plans to do so. That's quite significant.
Yeah, and I've talked to senior diplomats overseas that confirm that. They're really united. They're really activated. In fact, I talked to a senior diplomat up in the United Nations saying that Bahrain, who's usually a quiet member of the GCC, is very active. So is UAE, Saudi Arabia. They're all united because of what they saw in response from Iran. So you're right. It's a horrible miscalculation by Iran, and it enables it to not just be Iran versus the Zionists and the U.S., it is their Arab neighbors that are a part of this, saying this regime has made the wrong calculation for years.
You know, I'm often reminded, and especially the last 24, 48 hours, of a pretty extraordinary interview that you did with MBS in the summer before the October 7th attacks, in which he expressed to you the interest of Saudi Arabia to normalize relations and actually, as I think President Trump has said, come out of the chaos and find commerce. There's so much more that's going on behind the scenes right now along those lines that is reshaping the Middle East as the way we have all known it for our entire lives, as being this unstable place where there's always a war going on. Do you see that when you kind of put it in that larger perspective? Obviously, things got derailed by October 7th. But do you see those things coming back into focus and Saudi Arabia and these other countries saying, you know what, we're going to normalize relations and actually make money here?
Yeah, Charlie, it's a great question. That interview was at the end of September 2023 with the Crown Prince, MBS, in which he said, we're getting closer every day to normalization. And, the camera turned off and essentially he said, no, really, we really are. And the next day, I did an interview with the Israeli Prime Minister after he saw the Crown Prince's interview on the sidelines of the UN, at which the Israeli Prime Minister said, we are getting closer every day. And in the words of a smart man in the Middle East, this could change the face of the Middle East. That was 7 days before October 7th. October 7th changed everything. The Hamas attack in Israel, it changed the entire dynamic. This right now potentially could change everything even further. And to your point, there is this wish and hunger to continue to do this normalization effort. And just as we're looking at the iceberg above the water, there's a giant iceberg below the water of negotiations that have been going on, particularly with the Trump administration, from the first to the second.
Yeah, there's no question about it.
Okay. Did you catch what Brett Baer just said? This is absolutely fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. Let me explain. You see, before October 7th, where Saudi Arabia and Israel were doing the dance and they were getting close to normalization, what would that have meant? It would have meant, if Israel was normalizing with Saudi Arabia, building on the Abraham Accords, but taking it to like many levels beyond. What would it have meant in terms of where Egypt would align? Would they probably start cozying up more to Israel and softening some of their hostility that has been building over the years, despite their peace treaty, and coming more into the Saudi/American/Israeli orbit? That's where the Middle East was going if Saudi Arabia is going to normalize with Israel. But remember, you still have the Assad regime, you still have a powerful Iran, you still have Hezbollah in Lebanon. And Hamas freaks out because they don't want this Saudi Arabia-Israel normalization, because the narrative that we've been sold, or the talking point we were sold, that Trump blew up with the Abraham Accords, was that you cannot have peace between Arab states and Israel, between Muslim states and Israel, until you solve the Palestinian issue. Okay? And the Abraham Accords happened after the embassy moved to Jerusalem, and cutting off aid to the Palestinian Authority completely, and they didn't get anything they wanted. And meanwhile, the Abraham Accords are going great. Saudi Arabia joins. The Palestinian issue just gets completely sidelined in the Middle East. Along comes October 7th. October 7th blows that all up, puts the Palestinian issue front and center. Israel is fighting Hamas. Oh, the genocide narrative. A lot of the Arab countries who were cozying up to Israel back off a little bit. Saudi Arabia, chief among them, and everything that happened with world opinion, with all that, right? And you have all of that happening, and it blows up the possibility of normalization with Saudi Arabia, which makes it seem like Hamas got what they wanted. They turned Saudi Arabia against normalization with Israel, and Saudi Arabia had been hardening that position in recent months, cozying up more to the Qatari-Turkish axis. Okay, now look what happened. By Iran attacking Saudi Arabia, attacking the Gulf states, turning them against them. By doing this, and you'll see, I'm going to show you more of how the Saudis are talking in a moment, by turning those Arab states, those Muslim states against Iran, and making them now, if Brett Baer is right in saying, hey, wait a second, this might lead, now that Saudi Arabia is going to be fighting alongside the Israelis and the Americans against the Iranians, and along with the Emiratis also, if this is where things are going, then maybe Saudi-Israeli normalization could be around the corner. And if there's Saudi-Israeli normalization and there's no Iranian regime, and there's no Iranian proxies, there's no Hezbollah, there's no Assad regime in Syria, I mean, talk about marginalizing the Palestinian cause. It could be that the domino effect of October 7th is such that the Palestinian issue becomes completely irrelevant. If Saudi Arabia returns to the normalization negotiating table in the wake of this war, this is something that we really need to keep an eye on. Okay? But let's see some other things here. So I told you, Saudi Arabia summoned the Iranian ambassador over the attacks, but look at this. The Lebanese government imposed an immediate ban on Hezbollah's military activities. Now, why is this relevant? Because this is a story on the front page of Arab News. Look at Arab News. Arab News, I've mentioned this before. Arab News is a Saudi royal family-owned outlet. It's basically regime media, okay, in Saudi Arabia. So by watching what they're headlining, what they are pushing, what narratives they're pushing, we can see where they think things are going. So the story I read you before about Saudi Arabia summoning the Iranian ambassador, that was also in Arab News, in their Japanese edition, but still funded by the Saudis, okay? They put this out in a number of different countries. But Saudi Arabia summons Iranian ambassador over attacks, and everything in this was just slamming the Iranians. This wasn't really a neutral story. It didn't bring the defense of the Iranians or like what their ambassador had to say. It just brings the rebuke of the ambassador. And here you have Arab News on the front page, the top story: Saudi Arabia intercepts 5 drones near Prince Sultan Air Base. So it's not just the oil refinery that gets hit, but this is a story from today, okay? And in this story, I'll get back to the Lebanese Hezbollah story in a second. But in the Arab, so you see what's on the front. This is the top story in Arab News, is their interception of this, okay? Saudi Defense Ministry spokesman, General Turki al-Maliki, announced the interception and destruction of 5 hostile aerial drones. And this is all coming from Iran, okay? And reckless and destabilizing, Saudi Arabia and allies condemn Iran's regional missile attacks. And look, on the front page of Arab News, after this story, what do we have down here? We have the Ras Tanura refinery that was bombed by the Iranians, Qatar shooting down 2 fighter jets from Iran, and the Lebanese government imposing an immediate ban on Hezbollah's military activities. Now, Arab News has been kind of pro-Hezbollah when it comes to Israel over the last few months. They've been kind of neutral on the Hezbollah disarmament issue. I read Arab News every day. Look what it says here. Lebanon's government said Hezbollah's overnight attack against Israel were illegal and imposed an immediate ban on the group's military activities. Right? They're parroting a Lebanese government position calling attacks on Israel illegal. Usually attacks on Israel don't get condemned by these governments. Okay, and they're condemning them. And the move comes after Iran-backed Hezbollah launched rockets at Israel, provoking retaliatory Israeli strikes. The government convened for 5 hours before reaching a decision. Joseph Aoun started the meeting by discussing repercussions against Hezbollah for attacking. Okay. Sources initially told Arab News that the ministers were pushing for a decisive response to Hezbollah's recklessness, regardless of the consequences. So what's happened here is that the Saudis are amplifying this message. This is Saudi media amplifying the recklessness and the rage against Hezbollah for attacking Israel. You get that? Because of what it's going to do to Lebanon, and they're highlighting that Qatar was attacked, that the Emirates were attacked, that they were attacked. Okay, this is where this is going. And MEMRI, the Middle East Media Research Institute, put up a story today: shift in Saudi Arabia's declared position on Iran war from neutrality to anti-Iran stance. And what they do is they go into the Arabic language Saudi media, which I don't read Arabic, and that's why they're such a great website. And they bring all the quotes from the editorial pages and everything going on in Saudi media, where you see that they've now adopted a combative tone against Iran. So following the direct Iranian attacks on its territory, Saudi Arabia has abandoned its declared position of neutrality and now defines Iran as an existential threat and reserves the right to respond with military force. Okay, the change in Saudi position was first evident in a statement by the Saudi Foreign Ministry, which condemned the Iranian attack on the kingdom and on the other Gulf states. We saw that. And it, while refraining from condemning Israeli and U.S. attacks on Iran. That's a good pickup. Meaning it's not just that they condemned the Iranian attacks, but they didn't condemn the U.S. and Israeli attacks. Right? They didn't condemn them. I mean, Tucker Carlson condemned them, but Saudi Arabia did not condemn them. This response contrasts sharply with the position taken by the Saudis during the last Israeli-American confrontation with Iran in June 2025, when they did condemn the strikes. So look at that. That's a very important point. In the June war, in the 12-day war, the Saudis condemned the U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iran, and now they're not. State-affiliated media outlets and senior Saudi journalists likewise adopted a combative tone towards Iran. They asserted that the Iranian attack has exposed Iran's ugly face and its true character as a direct enemy of the Saudi kingdom. They emphasized that Iran has lost whatever remained of Arab solidarity with it, and even expressed hope for the collapse of its regime and the removal of the threat it poses to the region. Okay, and then they bring quotes from the Saudi Foreign Ministry and from a commentary in a Saudi daily, Okaz, a major Saudi. I mean, everything. There's no free press in the Saudi Arabia. In the Okaz Saudi daily, which also says that the Foreign Ministry of Saudi Arabia conveyed readiness for a comprehensive response, which involves defending the kingdom's airspace, securing strategic depth, raising the level of operational readiness, and reserving the option of responding at a time and place to be determined by the Saudi leadership. They are ready to enter the war. That's what they are. That's what they're saying here. Editor of Saudi State Daily, Al Jazeera. That's not Al Jazeera from Qatar. That's a different one. After the war, Iran will be a different country that does not threaten others with missiles and nuclear weapons. And look at this, a senior Saudi journalist. Okay, this guy Sulaiman Asiri put up this tweet, this post on X, tombstone to the Islamic Republic, and listen to what he writes. Saudi columnist Fad Dibaji expressed optimism following the death of Ali Khamenei. He wrote on X, "I believe the death of Ali Khamenei will liberate Iran, Iraq, and Yemen from the ideology of the Iranian regime." He's talking about Shiites. Iraq is mostly Shiite. Iran is mostly Shiite. And by Yemen, he's referring to the Houthis, who the Saudis hate, who are Shiites. Okay? Restore their peoples to their natural choice of freedom and stability, far from extremism and imposed control, and shatter the chains of fitna, of civil strife that Khamenei imposed upon them. Okay? So you have these prominent Saudi journalists, and remember, there's no free press in Saudi Arabia. These prominent Saudi journalists who are all treating Iran as an enemy and talking about regime change and the fall of the regime. So this is a massive plot line in everything that we're following here. And what we could be looking at is that, Iran, as Brett Baer said, they were hoping to turn this into more of a regional war because Trump doesn't want escalation. Remember before the war, they kept threatening regional war. And I was saying, no one's going to come help them. They thought that they were going to just create a big mess and escalate things and have these countries begging America to stop the war quickly because they don't want to get bombed and they don't want all this regional instability. Instead, they just angered the Saudis and the Gulf states and isolated themselves. And now everyone wants the regime to fall. Wild. We live in unbelievable times. It's really interesting watching how the Saudis have changed their tune on Iran so quickly as a result of these attacks. All right. Have a happy Purim, everyone. Thank you for watching the channel. Thank you for helping build the channel. Please spread the word about everything that we're doing. Isn't it amazing that that Purim, a festival that celebrates the victory of the Jews over a genocidal Persian edict that was calling for the genocide of the Jewish people, Haman, this genocidal Jew hater at the top of the Persian government, was brought down, and history seems to be repeating itself on Purim this year. God bless you all.